Hi everyone, it's Gianna. I hope you guys are still doing okay. I hope you're not too stressed with school and everything. I hope you're all safe and healthy. I really miss seeing your faces on Sunday mornings, but that'll just make it even better when we get to meet together again, for the first time, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I think I'm just going to get right into it. So for the past couple weeks, we've kind of been jumping all over the place a little bit. Like we talked about specific verses that might help us during this time. We talked about what happened with Jesus on Palm Sunday. And that's been really good, but I had an idea to basically find weird or freaky or like funny stories in the Bible and talk about what we can learn from them and why they're even in the Bible. Because the more you read the Bible and the older you get, the more you realize how purposeful the Bible is. Like all the people that wrote the Bible, there's so many, but like Matthew, Moses, James, King David, tons of people all contributed to the Bible, but they were very deliberate about what they put in their books of the Bible, basically. And I think that's pretty cool. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. But today I thought I would tell you guys a story that I think is pretty cool and even a little bit funny. It is in 1 Kings chapter 18, and it's about Elijah, Ahab, and Jezebel. So if you don't know about the book of 1 Kings, it's about the kings of Israel. Because you know how God made David king over Israel? So 1 Kings kind of starts off with what happens when David is king, but then it kind of continues on because the people still wanted a king after David died. So it just kind of goes on and talks about each one of the different kings that were in charge of Israel. And today we're in the part of 1 Kings where it talks about when this guy named Ahab was king of Israel. And he was not a good king. He was not a good dude at all. And it's really funny when you read through the book of 1 Kings because it kind of switches back and forth. Some of the kings are really good and they follow God and they're awesome and they're doing exactly what God wants them to do and everything's great. And then the next king comes and they don't follow God. They worship other gods and they're bad people. And it's really interesting to see it kind of switch back and forth like that, where they stray away from God and then they come back, and then they stray away from God and then they come back. So Ahab is one of the kings that had really strayed away, where he started worshiping other gods like Baal, and him and his wife Jezebel, was not a nice woman, by the way, actually started killing prophets of God, because Elijah was a prophet, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But yeah, they brought in false prophets for other gods, and so Israel was not in a good place at this time. But Elijah was a prophet in the Old Testament. So he would hear from God and he would tell the Israelites what God wanted them to know or what he wanted them to do. He was basically a messenger for God. So yeah, Ahab was the king of Israel at this time. He was not a good king. So in this story, God wanted Elijah to actually go and see King Ahab. And Elijah was like, okay, if you say so, because I would be a little scared, honestly. But I'll start reading at verse 17. So we're just going to get right into it. When King Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. So God basically sent Elijah to have a showdown, basically, with the prophets of Baal, to show everyone that our God is the one true God. And Elijah is saying for the people to choose one. You can't serve both Baal and our God, because we know, of course, that our God is the only God. So Elijah sets up a bit of a contest, and it's really funny what happens next. So he tells all the fake prophets to go get 2 bulls and build 2 altars, but don't set fire to them yet. And then they will ask their God to set fire to the altar, and then Elijah will ask our God to set fire to that altar, and they'll see who answers. So the fake prophets say, yeah, okay, that seems fair. We got this. We can do this. So I'll start reading at verse 26. If you want to follow along, you totally can. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. Big surprise. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. And this is the funny part. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, no one answered, and no one paid attention. So Elijah starts making fun of these guys, basically, which I think is kind of funny. They must have felt a little bit silly at this point, and I always thought it was kind of sad how these guys thought that their God would want them to hurt themselves. Because our God would never want that, right? We know that, which is just one more reason to love him and to follow him, because he wants what's best for us. So then, it's our God's turn, and I'll let you guess what happens. Surprise. So, starting up again in verse 30, then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bulls into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. So Elijah doesn't just ask God to send fire. He drenches the altar 3 times with these huge jars of water, because he wanted all of them to know that God can do anything and exceed all of their expectations. So if any of you guys have been camping, you probably know that it is pretty much impossible to set fire to like wet wood. If you're trying to set a fire, you don't use wet wood, you use dry wood, right? So let's see what happens next. Starting in verse 36. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped down and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell and cried, the Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God. So God doesn't just send fire. He goes all out. He's like, I am God. I'm the real deal, which I think is pretty cool. So now when Ahab told Jezebel what had happened, Jezebel was kind of angry, and actually she wanted to kill Elijah. Not good for him. So he ran away because he was afraid. So starting in 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 4, we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, Get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down. The angel of the Lord came back a 2nd time and touched him and said, Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by the food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. So even though God had just showed Elijah and everybody how powerful he is, Elijah was still very scared for his life. And he had been running away for a while, and he was tired and he was hungry. So he told God, I just want to lay down and die. Which, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I'm feeling tired or I'm feeling hungry, I can be a little bit dramatic too. I can be a little bit dramatic like that. But God knew exactly what Elijah needed. he let Elijah take a nap and sent an angel to give him some food. So what I take from this whole story is that God can do the impossible. He exceeds our expectations, and he knows exactly what we need, even the simple things. So this is your gentle reminder that one time in the Bible, Elijah was like, God, I'm so mad, I'm so tired, I want to die. So God said, here's some food. Why don't you take a nap? So Elijah slept, ate, and decided things weren't so bad. So never underestimate the power of a nap and a snack when you guys are feeling overwhelmed or exhausted, and to remember that God understands and knows exactly what we need. Even in times like this, the situation that we're in now, he knows exactly what we need, and he's here for us. So that's all for this week. I hope you guys thought the story was interesting and you learned a little bit if you haven't heard this story before. I'll see you guys on Wednesday for another Zoom meeting. If you haven't joined in on those, we'd be totally happy to have you. The password is the same as it was last week. We'll be meeting at 7:30, but you can check the email or the Facebook page for the password, and then I'll be posting on the youth Instagram also. Let's see, for our homework this week, I want you guys to read Psalm 27. It's a really beautiful one, and it's not super long. So if you guys have any prayer requests, you don't hesitate to reach out to me through the Instagram. And other than that, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.